conversation with Sandra on the bed naked, right? Pete went on the Vindolanda trip, right? And Pete will remember that when he went into the Vindolanda Museum, which I think he did, he would have seen that the Roman footwear was definitely not sandals.
Yep.
Oh no, they had boots, didn't they?
And they also had socks.
Yes.
They had socks. And we know that they had socks because there's archaeological evidence of them having socks. Thank you very much.
In fact, they used to wear socks and sandals, which every smart person knows that's the ideal way to dress your feet. Free yet cozy. Free yet cozy.
Well, actually, I think you're completely wrong. I think wearing sandals and socks. Hang on, wearing sandals and socks and wandering around completely naked. That's the way to live.
Yeah. Well, no. Maybe dressed like a Saxon. No, what I mean is that the Romans were looking like they were wearing those sort of frocks. You know what I mean.
There's camera somewhere.
Right, okay.
The bucket.
Hey, hang on. Flipping heck. I tell you, this is a bloody nightmare on a Wednesday morning. I've just had enough already.
I'm going to shut myself off.
Yeah, I think you should. That's a good idea. Right, okay. My God, I tell you what, right? Hey, my God, Kate, we could have made a lot of money out of Anne, couldn't we? We could have just sort of tried to get her to pay for something else.
Keep adding classes. Keep adding more classes.
Yeah, exactly. Anne doesn't pay. Anne doesn't pay for the Thursday morning class, which isn't happening, but she doesn't know that. Right. Kathy, any news that you've got from us this week?
No, sorry, there isn't anything.
Are you doubly sure on that? You can phone a friend.
No, I'm sure there's nothing.
Right, okay. So the only person left is in fact wonderful Richard.
No, I've got nothing.
I think freaking boring lives.
Nothing interesting. Anyway.
Nothing interesting.
Oh, I tell you what, I did think of something, and it's sort of news.
Yeah, go on.
Are they going to dismantle the incinerator, or should we run a competition on ways to reuse it, like a multi-level disco or something?
Hang on a minute. Are you seriously saying it? They're doing away with it?
Well, they will never be able to use it. They did the modeling all wrong for it. They will never. It will never pass. No. So if they don't tear it down, we could maybe turn it into, like I say, a multi-floor disco, or the world's largest ice cream parlor. You know.
So what you're saying? They've spent £20 million on this thing, and nothing's going to be happening with it.
They're not going to be able to use it. That's from my son, the environmental monitoring consultant son. He said they didn't do the modeling right. It was all terrible.
Are you talking about the gasification plant, not the incinerator?
No, the incinerator.
What's that then?
It's down in the docks.
Well, that's a gasification plant. Well,
they're burning. The thing is, they did do that. They did. Yes, but the black smoke was all coming out all over the town. It's not going to happen.
Oh, yes, they put it in the wrong place.
Exactly. Yes. So if they don't rip it down, we could turn it into something useful. Like I say, like the world's biggest ice cream parlor or something.
Oh, we could.
My grandson was one of the operation managers there when they first tried to commission it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't we call it the Barry Brothel Bordello?
Well, we need to do something that would tempt the hipsters from what is it called, the goods sheds over this way. Although that's only ever happening on a weekend anyway.
Oh right, okay.
I think.
Where's this place where they sell vintage clothes and things like that? It's like
that's good sheds, but it's crap. The vintage clothes, it's very small and not very vintage and really boring. They have some shops, you see, in these like railway car things. Oh, right. But they're like what my friend describes them, they're hobby shops. They're only like open at the weekend, and it's maybe it'll get bigger. But the thing is, there's no place for people to park or anything around there. It's not very much.
Oh, well, we
Yeah.
could do something a bit better then down.
That's right. I think we should do it in
Exactly.
Halton Road. We should do it in Halton Road. Bring people back to Halton Road.
You could do whatever you like in Alton Road, right? Okay, then we're gonna get started now. We are gonna
Okay.
look at we're gonna go back to the Barry book. That's what we're gonna do. I want us to be finished by about 25 past 12. So we've got 1 hour to crack this.
Just quickly, who is that
Yeah, go on.
behind you then? Who are those behind you?
Yeah.
There's a strange looking helmets on some of them.
The individuals behind me. It's a scene of Hengist and Horsa arriving on the coast of Kent.
Ooh.
One of them's Hengist. I think one of them's Hengist and the other one's Horsa, and you've got a load of other people there.
Genghis Khan.
No,
No.
right. Let's just get on. Oh God, right. Okay. So what I want us to do is to first of all thank Kate for taking some nice photographs for my Barron District column. Hopefully this week, the column in the Barron District will look at 69 High Street, which I just, it's one of those buildings in High Street, Barry, that you seem to pass for years, and then it was built in 1891. Can't fault it, and basically basically what we've got is some wonderful terracotta, and we've got some bath stone and brickwork. So if you ever get a chance to go down to High Street, have a good look at the building. It's beautiful, and that's what my column is on in the Barron District this week. So what I want us to do, back to Barry, we're looking at the Barry book, and I've got some images. So I want us to we've gone back to the Barry book because we've been doing other stuff for the past few weeks. So we're on from page 57 and to page 63 and maybe 65, and we're going to sort of do a reappraisal of what's written in the Barry book, and if everything is what we agree, or some of the things in the Barry book we disagree. So that's what we're going to do. So I think what we need to do is start off with an image in a few moments of Barry Castle, actually taken from the Barry book, and it's something I want to show you on that image, which is not really to do with the archaeology at all. So this is what I want us to do. I want us to glare at Barry's past and to try and understand Barry's past. So the chapter 3 in this is Castle, Church and Village, Medieval Barry, 1100 to 1500. The interesting thing is we're on page 57. So we've done the whole history of Barry in 56 pages. And then the medieval period goes on basically until page 100. So in other words, the medieval period over just under 500 years, 400 years, basically has as much coverage as the preceding thousands of years. It's very, very strange. I think the Barry book was meant to be more of a historical book rather than a look at the archaeology and geology of Barry. This is what comes across to me, and maybe it's come across always to me. So it starts off with the wonderful eminent archaeologist Howard J. Thomas saying, the modern town of Barry lies over a once rural landscape which has been continuously occupied and cultivated for at least 800 years. Well, what he's referring to is he's talking to the true expanse of Barry. He's talking about, really, when we think about Barry being a rich, massively fully occupied, occupied, cultivated landscape in a rural context, right? We're talking about that. That's basically from the medieval period onwards. Before that, the occupation of Barry, as we've already said, was a bit bitty. The odd Roman era site here, the odd Iron Age site over here, lots of woodland all over the place. But it's the medieval period that Barry seems to come into its own. Barry and district, I would say, because people get very angry when you talk about Barry, and in fact, it was up until 1884 that the biggest village in Barry was in fact Carrickston. So it's not Barry, it's Barry and district, or Barry juxta Barry, or whatever you want to call it. So when we think about the Wood Barry book. We're thinking really about everything that's been unified since 1884. But before 1884, things in the Barron district were very, very different. Cadoxton had a population which was much greater than Barry itself. So before the building of the town, the principal geographical feature of the area was an island in the Bristol Channel, divided from the mainland by a sheltered tidal estuary led by the Cadoxton River. And one thing that I would say that I don't think we've mentioned, but I've mentioned in prose, is that whenever we think about Barry, we primarily think about Barry Island. Lots of writers like Leyland are writing about Barry Island. All these other writers, John Story, he's really in the late 1800s, he's interested in Barry Island. Lots of people are writing about Barry Island really more than anything. And you know, when you go anywhere today, you say you're actually from Barry, and they say, "Oh, Barry Island."
Yeah.
You know, it's always what happens. Oh, Gavin and Stacey, Barry Island. Well, there's a lot more to Barry Island. There's a lot more to Barry than just bloody Barry Island. This is what I like. This is the anger, but this is what the popular press is with Barry Island. So the semicircular hinterland. So basically, what we're talking about semicircular is that circle that curves, isn't it? Sort of curves. All the way from Holdnap Point, going all the way back to Barry, all the way around to Cadoxton, all the way over to Biglis. That's your semicircle, the semicircle hinterland, stretching all the way from Porthkerry, all the way then sweeping around from Coldnap, all the way then to sort of Sully Moors. So enclosing the Northern Island, so it goes on to say, so we got Sully Moors, and what we then have is it's discussing about the height of the landscape. So what we've got, the height of the landscape itself is coming up to 50 meters above sea level in places, which if you look at the Barry landscape, this is where you're looking from the base all the way up that slope. Trinity Hill going all the way up is quite a steep slope, so that sort of massive landscape, 50 odd meters as it rises, but probably more than that. The landscape itself, before the medieval period, before the 1000s, and I'm rather sort of ad-libbing what's written here, was probably much richer than it is today. When you go up to 1884, the landscape is very clayey, very loamy, very limestoney, because it's been extensively ploughed and farmed intensely from the middle to end part of the 1100s. So obviously, being on a slopey landscape, lots of all that rich soil has washed into the sea. And in other words, all that stuff that's been washed into the sea is eventually going out into the Bristol Channel and is creating all those sandbanks and everything else that we've seen over years. Goes on to say, gradually developing the landscape that we do. We talk about this idea of shallow rocky soils and so on. So what we don't want to do is bring our opinion on what we're about to say next, because we've had a whole class on this. So Howard Thomas goes on to say this very important point: the place Barry, modern Welsh Ibarri, was certainly in existence from the 1200s and probably much earlier. So the name existed, Howard Thomas is saying, before the Barry family. Its origin, however, remains uncertain. The name could have been derived from three sources: possibly a local Saint Barrack, alias Barog, or Barak, without instead of the K, you've got the H. Some actually put a K on where you've got Baruck. In this book, it's got Baruch. Occasionally a couple of R's in it as well.
It's buried on the island in the 6th century.
So we're told. And the other meaning, or an old Welsh word bar, bar, meaning hill or rise. Well, we've got a bone of contention with that. The word bar could also be associated with an Anglo-Saxon term, meaning exactly barr. But barrow in Furness, for example, barrow refers to a woodland on a hill. So bar occasionally meaning wooded hill, or asht, or bar if it's an Old Welsh word, and the Anglo-Saxons derived from the Old Welsh word. But see, we have got a lot of debate here. So bar, hill, rise, sometimes bar, double R, with the Anglo-Saxon meaning hill with trees on it, which makes sense.
Yeah.
The other one, third, which is less likely, from an Old Norse word meaning valley, shore, or island. Well, Peter doesn't question the word home when he goes to flat home or steep home. So if Pete doesn't question the word home and the origins of home as being Nordic Viking, then why do we question the meaning of Barry Island not being from an Old Norse word? That's a really good point I've just made. It's no, it is no, honestly, Kate, you may chuckle. You may chuckle, Kate.
Something.
No, I'm not chuckling. I agree.
Yeah, good.
There's a Barry in Ireland.
And actually, the other thing as well is I was doing some research the other day. There's also a Barry in the south of England somewhere as well, which I didn't know. And there's also a Barry in Scotland. So whenever you type in the National Library of Scotland mapping service that me and Richard use, if you type in Barry, we always go to a place in Scotland. And also, right, I went to book a train ticket once from Barry to Cardiff, and the price come up as 400 quid because it was taken from Barry in Scotland. So I didn't do that again.
Right. Scotland.
Barry, Illinois is a big town.
Yeah, there is a Barry in Illinois. Yes, you are.
I wonder which Barry it was named after.
What? Oh, shut up.
Well, you know.
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. I thought you were going to say the one in Illinois. The Barry in Wales was named after the one in Illinois. Right. Okay. Okay. I think you're stretching the Mad Dog legend a bit too far there. Maybe Mad Dog came back and said, "Right, stop it, Kate." Whatever its origins, the name originally described the island, but by the 1100s was applied also to much of the mainland of the coastal area within the parishes of Barry, Merthyr Devon, and Cadoxton. Now, this is actually an interesting point, which I don't think we have. Which what I'm going to do, I'm going to put an image on a minute because there's an interesting point to be made there, right? Which I don't think we've really questioned. I'm going to put an image on the background, right? So Pete's going to say he doesn't want to be looking at that ugly person too much longer. So thanks, Pete. I just because, Pete, you're jealous of the fact that you haven't got any hair. Oh yeah,
I have.
Pete,
I need a haircut.
hang on a minute, Pete. Let me correct you. Pete's making out these days, and he's got to go to the he's got to go to the
castle.
barber. Have you?
The roof with Cornish tin, Cornish slate.
Shut up! Right. Hang on a minute. You know, oh, there it is. Pressing on that. There we go. There is something odd about this image. Right. Anyway, the point I wanted to make, right? The point I really wanted to make. There were parish boundaries and there were ecclesiastical divisions of land before the Normans. We don't need to disagree with that. We've got to agree because, you know, Wales was a Christian country before the Normans come here anyway. So we've got to agree on that point, right? The big question is, right, if Barry Island is named after the word bar, right, what was the mainland named after? Because it goes on to say, if you read that point, but by the 1100s was applied also to much of the mainland of the coastal area within the parishes of Barry, Merthyr Devon, and Cadoxton. So, what was the mainland named before the Normans used the word Barry, right, and used it to describe their family, i.e. the family gives its name to the parish, right? What was the name of that area before? Do you see the point I'm trying to make? That is an interesting point. We will, what we always do, Kate, we run with the ball and we keep running and we can't remember what ball we're actually carrying. We're in a football match, right?
I know.
Yeah, do you know what I mean?
It's a wiggly line. It's a curly line.
Yeah, it's a curly line. It's that sort of, yeah. So what this is the problem. So from the middle of the 1200s, the place name became restricted to Barry Island and the parish of Barry, which lay close to its western mainland shore. Well, we know that. This is what we're always told. We're told Barry Parish, that bit of Barry Island, Friars Point, Little Island, right? But what was the name originally, right? So what I want us to do is I want us to look at this image, right? And what is wrong with this image? What is wrong with this image is that little sign on the left, which is no longer on the kettle.
Oh, right.
Now what happened was that what happened is that I'll give you a little bit of the backstory. In the 1950s, this place was overgrown. There was nettles everywhere, right? There was an electrical substation just off Pitcher on the left, right? You know, it didn't look like this, right? So from the 1950s, 1960s, the local gang of Howard Thomas and Gary Tiley and Gerald Baudet and Maurian Williams and a few others decided to take it upon themselves to get this site cleared and do a bit of archaeological excavation. And with that, what they then did, they put a sign there. That's the sign. That's the original sign. Now, this is where I think this is how I upset Howard Thomas back in about 1989. Right, the sign was not looking good. Right, so I took it down. I took it home, and I think somebody managed to get me a photocopy of it. And what I did, I took a little step, and I took some screws with me, and I put the sign back up there. Right, unbeknown to me. Somebody in the local council had passed me thinking that I had put the sign up there, right? And it had never been there before. And what happened, the sign was taken down and chucked away, right? Because they thought I put it up there, when in fact it'd always been there. And word got back to Howard Thomas, and he was not too pleased because the site's a scheduled ancient monument, right? They couldn't put a new sign up there. So I thought I'd put that in there. It was a really nice little sign, and if I can ever find the text that was actually on that sign, I will no doubt share it with you guys. You can't exactly read it there, but it was a nice little sign. It basically said something along the lines, "This is put up here by Barry Archaeological Society," or whatever. I can't remember what the words were. Nice little sign. Anyway, moving on. So Barry Island is mentioned by lots of much older writers beyond John Leland. There was a writer called Ralph Higden in the 1300 to 1364, a Ralph Higden, name that you wouldn't really come across, a name that you other than the Barry book, it's the only time I've seen it. So this is one figure who writes about Barry Island. Remember the word Barry Island. Okay, Barry Island was two islands. Remember, it was Sully Island and Barry Island. We've already done that one. The bit over towards the Sully side, that was Sully Island. The bit over towards our side, Little Island, Friars Point, was Barry Island. So the earliest account, there is another account, an earlier account beyond 1300 to 1364. There's an early account by Gerald de Barry, Gerald of Wales, Geraldus Cambrensis, and he's writing in 1188 or thereabouts. And if anyone remembers the exhibition in Cardiff in 1988, Geraldus Cambrensis, Gerald of Barry, right, describing his preaching tour of Barry in the company of Archbishop Baldwin in 1188. Now, whether there's a little bit of debate about, because there is another Barry family in Wales, but we'll just run with that a minute and we'll read out what Geraldus Cambrensis wrote, and we're not going to say this in Latin at all. Not far from Barry, there is a small island just off the shore of the Severn Sea, which the local inhabitants call Barry. You can make a poem out of that. I dare you, Kate. Here we go. Run that again, Kate. Here we go. Not far from Barry, there is a small island just off the shore of the Severn Sea, which the local inhabitants call Barry.
Oh, that'd make a fine shanty for you in your gear. A shanty.
In my shanty group. Yeah, in my shanty group. Oh, you tested me there. That's going to go on TikTok. That's good.
Excellent.
That's good. Yeah, thank you, Kate. Yeah, I always knew you'd make a good manager. It takes its name from Saint Baroch, who used to live there. His remains have been placed in a coffin, and they can be found there in an ivy-clad chapel. It is an odd thing that in a rock by the sea, where one first lands on the island, there is a small crack. If you press your ear to it, you can hear a noise like that of a blacksmith's at work. The blowing of bellows, the strokes of hammers, and the harsh grinding of files on metal. Now, we're not going to say anything more about that, are we, Richard? One could well imagine that a sound of this sort would come from the sea waters rushing into hidden orifices beneath the island. But it is no less loud when the waves draw back, and it can be heard just as well when the shore is dry as when the tide is up. Now, interestingly enough, if we take away the last bit there, which is a big section, the only mention that we've got is of Barry Island, really, because it says Barry, basically the inhabitants of Barry. So Barry is Barry Island. If you look at the short text, small island, Barry is Barry Island, right? Not the mainland. So it does actually ask you to question, was in fact the parish of the Barry family, which was Contaminius, which is basically the ecclesiastical parish, and the lordship was the same area. Was there actually another name for the lordship of Barry, right? Because but our friend Geraldus Cambrensis is only referring to Barry Island. Goes on to say, Gerald was at Cardiff when he wrote this, but it is doubtful whether he actually visited the island. Again, we're obsessed with the island. His information was taken more likely from family tradition and hearsay. So he may not have visited the island at all. And I'm going to say the same. Nor did John Leland when he sailed along the Bristol Channel. We say it's 1539. Most say it's 1540. But he didn't get out of his boat either when he described Barry Island. And he mentioned a castle in the distance as well, obviously Barry Castle, which it was by that time, that's what the area, what it was named. The description of the chapel seems fairly reliable, and there is a deep fissure leading into the rock of Nell's Point. But his account of a blowhole may result from a confusion with Worm's Head in Gower, or some other island, perhaps off the Pembrokeshire coast. Can I just stop us there? We're not going to talk any more about that story because that's something that me and Richard are working on. So we're not going to do anything more about that. But one thing I will say to you is a little story that I've not relayed to anyone, right? And do you know what, Pete, right? Yeah, I'm going to ask Pete. Do you know, Pete, when you've witnessed things in your life and you don't talk about them for decades and suddenly you start talking about them, right? Is it just me?
No.
Or do we continually talk about them? Because I'm going to tell you a story, Pete, that I've never relayed to anyone. I know I've never had this conversation with anyone, right? I went with my dad to the Selly Social Club, which no doubt Pete went numbers of times when he used to watch my granddad Bill coach the local cricket team. Right, so we went to the Selly Social Club on the sort of we'll call it the moors, but it's not the moors, on the older playing fields there. And there was this chap coming with a metal detector, right? So I must have been about 12, and my dad went over, started talking to him, right? And he said, "Oh, I've been metal detecting on Selly Island, well, scheduled ancient monument, but I didn't know any better when I was 12." And he said, when he's been diving, right? Can't remember. It must have been high water. When he's been diving on Selly Island, right? At the back there, the side that faces Flatholme, at the back there's actually a hole that goes underneath Selly Island, right? And he described that you would go into the hole, right? And there'd be some kind of space, right? And he then, you know what's going to happen, don't you? He went from telling us a nice descriptive thing, and then he said, "Oh, that's where I think the pirate Alfredo Moronesco in the 1200s used to hide his treasure," right? So obviously he spoiled it, and he said he went back there a few times to look in the hole. He was actually quite obsessed by it. So the reason why I've mentioned that, right, and I've never relayed that to anyone, this is the first time I've said that, right? This thing about a blowhole, it may have actually been easily referring to that. But me and Richard do know something else. But obviously you might be thinking that there's a blowhole on Selly Island, because if you're thinking, maybe at one point that there was a hole in the top and it blew through. I don't know anything more about that story, and I'm certainly not going to put on my diving suit, right? And Kate, do you know the reason why I've got a diving suit in the cupboard?
You're the man from Atlantis?
No, what it is, right? I've got a diving suit and rolls of tape. So if there's a zombie apocalypse, right, I put the diving suit on, right? I get some gloves on, tape up that bit, and my whole body's protected except for my neck.
Oh, that's not good. What if they bring vampires with them?
Oh, well, Kate, as you know, I've bitten into your neck several times. I don't need to be warned. So Barry and Selly are noted in a list of islands of Wales compiled by the antiquarian William Worcester in 1478. I think Worcester spelled R-E on the end instead of E-R, but I think I've seen it spelled. This is a third reference in 1478. He derived his somewhat garbled information from the mariners of Bristol. After describing Bury Homes and Lundy, he states, "The next island of Wales is Barry Island, following the island called Little Sully." Now, interesting. It is a mile long and half a mile wide and is not inhabited, but cattle are grazed there. There is a chapel of St. Nicholas. Selly Island follows Barry Island 9 miles off and is 3 shots across in all directions. Now, if we read that again, right? The next island of Wales is Barry Island, following the island called Little Sully. Now that's really interesting that you use the word Little Sully. That's quite odd. And interesting enough, and then it says Selly Island. So, right, okay, very interesting. Selly Island follows Barry Island 9 miles off and is 3 bows shot across in all directions. So it's rather interesting. I'm thinking that the word little might actually refer to Little Island, because it's not exactly clear what's going on there. Anyway, so that's another, but whatever we're talking about, there are 3 descriptions and all of them are about Barry Island.
Do you remember you said that there was a harbour in Selly? No, Dennis
Swanbridge.
Power. Dennis Power.
Well, actually, Anne, what we then go on to is this other thing here, right? But Anne's made a wonderful point. And Anne, this is where you come into my own personal story, right? Anne and I used to go for meals, right? And Anne's not going to deny it, are you, Anne?
No.
We used to go for meals, and one of the meals that we went to the captain's wife, didn't we? Right?
Yeah.
And Anne dropped me right in it, right? Because when I went to the loo, right, this woman come up to Anne and she said, "Oh, oh God, oh, what's that actor that mentioned?"
Oh yes. You know, the musical
Torchwood.
chap.
Yeah, the Torchwood, the one from America.
American.
Oh God. Anyway, Anne, the person said, "Oh,
No,
not Larry,
Barrymore.
Barrowman,
Barrowman.
John Barrowman." Yeah, the woman said, she said, "Oh, John Barrowman comes here," and she said, "Oh, oh, that guy who just gone to the toilet, he's an actor as well, right?"
Oh right.
And you then said, I think you said, "Oh," she said, "Oh, I'll tell John Barrowman that he was in here as well."
Oh.
Anyway, the long story is, by there, the captain's wife is in Swanbridge, right? And interestingly enough, Sully Island, where Sully Island is today, is opposite Swanbridge, not Sully, because Sully's further on down the coast. It's opposite Swanbridge, right? So this next point is really interesting, right? It should actually be Swanbridge Island. However, it wasn't always an island. It's sometime in the medieval period it became an island, right? Because this is very important in this next account. It is uncertain from Worcester's account whether Little Sully was Sully Island or whether it was the same place as Little Island on the west side of Barry Island. So this makes sense, doesn't it? It says, following the island called Little Sully, which if you look at that, that's Little Island, as in Barry Island, right? Then it describes that you've got Barry Island, which is 1 mile long and half a mile wide. It mentions St. Nicholas, and then Sully Island follows Barry. So there you go. So in other words, the little island, Little Sully, that they refer to is in fact Little Island, which is part of the Barry parish, right? So now it's very confused. And in fact, before Richard jumps in here, until the census of 1841 describes Barry Island as we know it today as Sully Island. So this is where it gets really confusing, which seems at one time from map and geological evidence to have been a separate island before being joined to Barry Island proper by a narrow spit of land. Do you know what? This is something that when Richard came to my classes initially, I was telling everybody, I was saying, look, Barry Island was in fact 2 islands, and you'd always get people coming in, no, it wasn't, right? And I actually deduced that myself, but whether I'd ever got that from the Barry book or not, but there it is in black and white. Now, there was 2 separate islands. The dedication of the chapel is clearly mixed up with the parish church of Barry on the mainland, familiar to medieval mariners from prominent positions as a navigational landmark. Whoa, gosh, we're covering quite a lot today, in text rather than images. And look at this. This is also from the Barry book, so we're getting a bit of an idea. And there is something else quite obvious here. If you if you're noting the word Barry Island on there, right? When you think about it, this is quite a distance from Sully, which is actually off screen, right? And there's lots of things that I don't think are as clear as black and white as I tell you, and this book tells you, and me and Richard sits down and tells you there's a trick missing here. The most informative topographical description is as follows: to us by John Leland, who was appointed King Henry the VIII who was appointed by King Henry VIII to make a systematic antiquarian survey of the realm in about the years 1536 to 1539. Can I remind you that John Leland was almost blind? Unlike the earlier authors, Leland's information was based on first-hand observation rather than hearsay and written in English. Again, I'll repeat, he was almost blind. His itinerary followed the Glamorgan coast and included several excursions inland into the uplands. So in other words, he must have had somebody with him to try and describe things to him that he wasn't really able to make out properly. So what we've got is we've got this description from John Leland. Now we've seen three other descriptions, right? We've seen from the likes of Ralph Hidgon in the 1300s, Gerald Convensis in the 1200s, and we've got William of Worcester in the 1400s. Now we've got John Leland, not part of the three, may I add. And his account takes us from Sully to Aberthaw. I've got a reprint of the copy of the book, and and you'll be surprised, you guys, how much work I've done on the studio. It's starting to look pretty good.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm only ever in Barry really late at night. So, Kate, if you want to come late at night and be bitten on the neck by a vampire, you're welcome.
Sure, I'd help you with the studio. Sure.
I tell you what, Kate. If I put a bag over my head, right, you'll kiss me, won't you?
What? Kiss the bag?
Yeah, you can kiss the bag because you know my ugly face with a beard. You wouldn't want to kiss it. So here we go. Ruth would. I tell you what. Ruth is a really dangerous woman, right? When I was working in Newquay, she came up to me with a boyfriend alongside her and gave me a massive socker on the lips, right? She bled me dry, and I think I nearly ended up dying. From Sullymouth to Aberbarry. Anne, don't you laugh, you remember those kisses. From Sullymouth to Aberbarry, will cometh a little rye of fresh water to the Severn is about a mile. I gotta spread the love, Anne. The head of this rye is scant a mile off by northeast in a playground. Well, this is playground, plain ground. So you've got to sort of rehash this. So where come a little rise of fresh water to the Severn is about a mile. The head of this rise is scant a mile off by northeast in the plain ground. So what we go on this beck, we don't come across the word beck, do we? On this beck standeth the castle of Barry, about a quarter of a mile beyond the west ripe rise of it. This castle stand, I'm just going to read this as I feel. This castle stands on a little hill, and most of it is in ruin. Master St. John of Bedford is lord of it. Maurice St. John, uncle to Sir John St. John, was owner of it. I do remark that's quite original, John St. John, isn't it? Right again, this brook mouth lie Barry Island. So between this brook lay the Barry Island. The passage into it at full sea is a flight shot over as much as the Thames is above the bridge. So we're talking about the width of the River Thames as a comparison with this, which would be very familiar to Leland. At low water, there is a broken causeway to go over, or over the shallow streamlet of Barry Brook on the sands. It's referring to as Barry Brook. We know it as Sully Brook, which is, yeah. The isle is about a mile in compass, and half very good corn, grass, and some wood. The farm, we've already mentioned this last week, but it's a description here. The farm is worth £10 a year. There is no dwelling on the island, but there is in the middle a fair little chapel of St. Barracks where much pilgrimage was used. We mentioned this last week. Half a mile and more beyond Aberbarry is the mouth of Cumkiddy. This brook rise flat north a mile and half from the place where it goes into the Severn Sea. There is no notable buildings on this rise. The soil of the brook side of the rise in this valley has good corn, grass, and wood. From Kiddymouth, we're talking about from Porthcurry, where no entrance is for ships, to the mouth of the Thor, a 3 mile by very principal good corn ground. Good corn growing ground, it should be. At the mouth of the Thor, ships may come into the haven mouth. It's really interesting that they mentioned there that from Kiddymouth, Porthcurry, where no entrance is for ships. So in other words, by that stage, by 1540, it was no longer a it was no longer a harbour. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go on to this image. So as we can clearly see there, if we sort of bring this down a little bit, if we see basically walk from Barry over to say Callaxton, 2 miles. I'm sure every Barry person has done that walk at some point. Do you know what, right? When I was a child, going over to Callaxton was like going to another world. Nobody from Barry went to Callaxton and nobody from Barry went to Gibbonsdown, right? And when I walked there one day, right, it was like entering another world. It really, really was. Honestly, it was. It was just like 2 miles away from Barry. It was a long distance for a 13-year-old to walk. Well, a 13-year-old wouldn't walk anywhere these days because they're just too fat. But you know, going over to Callaxton, another world. And can you imagine what that would have been like back then, with the very boggy trackways in the winter months and so on? It would have been much longer going along those tracks. The 5 villages of Barry. So we've got Barry shown there, Cumkiddy, Barry. We've got Merthyr Dyfan there. We've got Highlight above that, and we've got Callaxton. Well, I will add with Whitland, which is between Cumkiddy and Porthcurry. We're also going to add Halton there as well, East Barry. So we've added that in with the list of the villages and the hamlets, right? And what I'm going to make the comment is, if you want to refer to Cumkiddy as a village, I'm definitely going to refer to Halton as a village. So put that in there. All within the town's boundaries. Now, this is a good point. Owe their foundation to the Norman conquest and colonization of Glamorgan in 1091. So I think the point I need to make here is that there is an absence of evidence, i.e., nobody discusses what was at these locations before the Normans, right? And I'm gonna make this brash statement, and I'm gonna say it. The reason why the Normans chose those areas to have villages and hamlets is because they already existed, right? And maybe I'm going to correct myself slightly. So Barry already existed before the Normans. Merthyr Dyfan existed before the Normans, and Callaxton existed before the Normans, right? I'm just going to correct myself on 2 issues. Cumkiddy and Highlight were 2 villages that fell out of use in the medieval period when it was hit by the plague, and that may indicate that those 2 areas may not have been villages before the Normans, because they were in very, very poor ground. You would think that the native population would choose very, very rich ground for agriculture because it wasn't a massive population here. And I will also say that the population wouldn't have been massive either. A standard manor back then would have had a population of 150 people. And we know that the Barry Manor would have been at least 2,000 acres, which is quite substantial. But that includes also Cumkiddy. So the average acreage for a manor back then was roughly between 500 and 700 acres. So 2,000 is quite considerable for the Barry Manor. But that does include, as I said, Cumkiddy. So if you could probably half that, the Manor of Barry was still quite substantial. Soon after the conquest, the most fertile land was retained by the Chief Lord Robert Fitzhammond, and the remainder allocated amongst his baronial followers. So I tell you what, I've laid down my life for you, but you give me the crappiest of land, fair enough. Each manor was held in return for military service, assessed as a number of knights' fees. So in other words, a knight's fee would be that if, for example, you had a war and you were, I don't know, going to the Crusades, or you're going to go and fight in France. If a knight's fee was say 3, then you would have to provide, 3 individuals to fight. 4 knights fees, 6 knights fees, 7 knights fees, right? 8 knights fees. You would have to supply that number of people to fight in a war for the Lord, i.e. Robert Fitzhammond. So in other words, if you think of all of these having a knight's fee, it would have gathered a small group of people from this area to fight. That's basically what a knight's fee is. So in Glamorgan, this service was for, and here we go. One other point as well is that how long do you serve the Lord of the Manor? Well, in Glamorgan, this service was for 40 days annually at Cardiff Castle. So if it was 1 night's fee, then the one individual would work for the Lord for 40 days. If it was 2 nights fees, it was 2 individuals that would have to work for the Lord for 40 days. If it was a campaign, it's a little bit more. Here we go. Commuted in peacetime for the sum of 6 shillings and 8 pence, which was known as ward silver for each fee. I'm probably sure that if you had a poor parish, you would probably say to the Lord, right, okay, over 5 years, we'll provide you a year's service at the castle. And hopefully you wouldn't have to pay anything up until that point. And hopefully the Lord would be dead, somebody else would take over, you'd never have to pay the fee. That's life. It's basically this isn't just about the Lord in Cardiff, it's about the king. So the king would say, right, who can we call upon? Oh, right, well, I've got these people, I've got these people. And a king would just take you off into battle and would use you for as long as he wanted. Well, so he believed. I'm only supposed to serve 40 days. 40 days and 40 nights. Didn't a certain Jesus Christ do that? Anyway, in the case of the larger holdings held by the service of several knights, the solution was to create sub-fees, namely to subdivide the land among the barons' own military followers to make up the number of knights required for the services owed. More or less to explain that. Each of these in turn was endowed with sufficient land for their sustenance. The lands held by military service were organised as manors and settled with peasants to the land. So if we think maybe that there are 6, maybe 7 holdings here, they're worth a lot more than sort of 1 night's fee. But for example, for the sake of argument, if this was worth 7 nights fees, and that's 7 amounts of 40 days of 7 individuals that would have to serve the Lord and in turn serve the king, because the Lord is there to be like on behalf of the king. The Barry area became incorporated into 2 large lordships held under the Chief Lord of Glamorgan, Penmark in the west and Dinas Powys in the east, held respectively for the families of the Umfraville and the de Summery family. Umfraville, Penmark, and the Summery, Dinas Powys. Penmark held for the service of 4 knights, was split into 4 manors. One was retained by its lord. The remainder were held as sub-manors. There were Fonmon held by the St. John's, West Penmark by the Odins, which is another word for kiln, actually, and Barry by the De Barrys. Dinas Powys valued at 3.5 nights fees. So in other words, that's 3.5 amounts of 40 days. Had local sub-manors. Cadoxton held for the service of 2 nights and highlights. Right, okay. Half a night's fee. So in other words, highlight was such bad land, right? That the Lord of the Manor, the Lord in Cardiff, he basically said, right, okay, it's so bad, right? We feel sorry for you, right? Just serve a few days for me, you know. It must be borne in mind that the knight occupying the lowest rung in the chain of the services and ward silver payments owed to a succession of superior lords was the actual owner of the land, in most cases, the resident lord. So, you know, it's talking a little bit about who actually owned the land and stuff there. So if we again, sorry for that technical stuff. So the Barry Manor, so in other words, the Barry Manor was a sub-manor of Penmark, right? It was a sub-manor of Penmark. In turn, Penmark was a sub-manor of the Lord in Cardiff. And then the Lord in Cardiff owed his allegiance to the king. It's like a pyramid system. King at the top, all these knights underneath, like the Fitzhammonds in Cardiff, and then you had another lord underneath that, which were the lords at Penmark, and then under that you had the lords of Barry. So the sub-manor of Barry, now this is a bone of contention, West Barry. So there must have been an East Barry. There it is. So is that a missing lordship? As it was sometimes called, was granted not long after the conquest by the Umfravilles at Penmark to the de Barry family. Now, we don't know personally, Howard Thomas would argue that he knows this as fact. Rest his soul as well. Not to completely disagree with you and disrespect you, Howard, but one thing I would say is lots of the records that are written years after or are copies of original documents. So there might have been some changes, right? And one point I'm going to make is this. Last night, I don't know if you caught part of the lecture last night, Kate, the early part of the lecture, but last night I mentioned about records. And I mentioned how by keeping things on the internet, records can be distorted. Well, actually, yeah, records in the past were distorted. And as we know, the books of Roald Dahl are being distorted. But if you get a first edition of a Roald Dahl book, you'll have all the things that go bump in the night in it. I was reading just a few days ago, this family disagreed with how their son died in the First World War. So they wrote to the person who's keeping the electronic records for the war records of the First World War. And the guide actually changed how the person died in the First World War. Basically, they said, oh, we can, there's this and that, he actually died this way. So instead of having the original record saying how the person did die, the family actually got them to change the way he died in the First World War, which I feel is wrong. So in other words, I tell you what, right, you know, somebody did something terrible in the First World War. I tell you what, Adolf Hitler, what we'll do, right? Adolf Hitler wasn't responsible for the deaths of anybody in Germany. We'll just change the records. You know, records are records. You can't change records. But I'm saying that back then, if you write a record that's based on another record, you can change names. And this is what I'm worried about. You know, this is what concerns me. You can change history. As my history teacher said, nobody lived in Wales until the Normans got you, explaining why all these villages were set up in Barry, Cadoxton and Merthyr Dyfed, because nobody lived here. My history teacher told me. Within the first or second generation of their acquiring Barry, they issued a younger branch which migrated westward to participate in further conquest, settling at Manorbier in Pembrokeshire. Gerald de Barry, the most renowned of this branch, explained the origins of their surname. Now, the thing is, Gerald de Barry's actually writing in the second person, and did he actually ever come to Barry in the first place? It's quite strange. It really, really is that he never actually visited the manor house of his own family in Barry. Don't you think that's a bit odd? A noble family resident on the coast of South Wales has taken its name from the island of Barry because it owns it and the neighbouring estates. Again, Gerald of Cambrensis in 1188. Barry was first of all the family's forename, and then its surname became de Barry. There is some historians argue that the Barry family gave its name to Barry Island. Do you know what I mean? Your mind starts to go after a while. It really, really does. But what we do know, the name Barry is a real name by the 1100s. It's actually established, right? So for example, somebody in North Wales may be called Rhys ap Rhys ap Rhys ap Rhys ap Rhys, right? So therefore, the surname's going to be Abrys, right? Or what we'll do, we'll have it as Rhys. That's our surname. Job done, right? But there may not have been a surname initially. And the other thing is, I would say, the idea of taking a surname is a medieval concept. Before then, people would be son of, son of, son of, son of, son of. There'd be a chronology, a genealogy, right? So it was only when the Normans came over that you actually took a surname. So the elder Glamorgan branch held other land under the Umfravels as portions of the knight's fees at Bikenstoke in Somerset and in Devon as well. So the family's possessions included also the submanor of Walterston in Gower. In the early 1200s, they were busy consolidating their West Country properties when Walterston was exchanged with Neath Abbey for their grange at Horn Blotton in Somerset. About 1300, they invested in the purchase of a townhouse in Cardiff, which was afterwards sold to one of the townspeople. So typical Barry people, we can make money out of anything. Hey, Kate, here's an example of how Barry people can make money out of anyone, right? And do you want some nice gorse flowers in a basket? I can send them to you next week for 10 quid.
Ooh.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, see, she's just bought some. Members of the Deed Barry family frequently appear as witnesses to deeds in various other parts of the country. A certain William de Barry was living between 1180 and 1133. He was on military service for King Henry III in Ireland in 1225, and in 1233 followed in the steps of his overlord Umfraville in the rebellion of Earl Marshall against the king. Very naughty. William had a son named Thomas and other children, probably including Luke and Richard. Nothing to do with Star Wars, Kate. Luke, sorry. Another William occurs about the middle of the 1200s. There was also a Walter in 1281 and a Lucas in 1299. At the close of the 1200s, there lived a William de Barry Jr. He attested a Michaelston deed in 1280 and a Merthyr Doven deed in 1304. So I completely agree with what Howard Thomas is saying here. What he's doing is he's confirming that as a name, the De Barrys actually existed by the 1100s, right? Where the origin and all the rest of it's up for debate, right? But we know that their name existed. It's the same as the De Sully family. The De Sully family didn't exist before the 1100s. After the 1100s, they existed. And in 1316, a certain William de Barry sat on a panel which gave evidence at an inquiry into the uprising of Llywelyn Bren. About the same date, he purchased a townhouse in Cardiff, which was inherited by a son named John. Now, I'm interested whether this is where we get the reference that Llywelyn Bren was actually in Barry and he burnt the manorial mill of the De Barry family in Porthcurry. Be interesting to know more about that. The last male member of the family was Thomas de Barry, who died in 1349. Kate, why did he die in 1349?
Oh, I can't remember the actual date of the plague, but it could have been the famine as well.
Yeah,
the 1300s was the worst time to live. Bloody hell.
1349, Kate. 1349 was the date that the plague would have hit Barry.
Oh, right. So,
Yeah.
what was the question?
So, oh, here we
They
go.
died of the plague.
Yeah. So what did Thomas de Barry die of? He died of the plague. There you go. In other words, he wasn't this wasn't the only manorial family that was wiped out in the area. We see the Caversham family at Cosmeston being wiped out as well in 1349, and it's very likely that the family at Ucheli, which is Upper Light, which is High Light, is also wiped out at that time as well. Whose daughter Isabella married John de Avion, Lord of Ifan and Sully. The family disappears from the Glamorgan records after 1349 plague. Barry Manor seems not long afterwards to have passed to the St. John's of Fonmon through an unredeemed mortgage of failure of the male line. By their acquisition, the St. John's became possessed of 2 knights' fees, or half of the 4 fees of Penmark, their ownership of which was confirmed by a deed of settlement in 1371, followed by a deed of partition in 1373 and 1384, in which their status was elevated from sublords to co-heirs of the lordship. In other words, it doesn't matter who these fees are paid for. You owed service to the king, right? So. And usually what would happen is that you as the Lord would serve service to the king, but it didn't really work that way. They would just send somebody who probably looked like you in armor, and that's the way it worked. Or just basically, I tell you what, right,
someone
Lord,
else. Yeah.
Yeah, I tell you what, Lord, right, what we're going to do, right, we'll give you 10 individuals to fight instead of me. Yeah, that's okay. By the way, I've only got 1 arm and 1 leg. Oh, that's fine then, you know. They inherited the other half in 1415 after the death of Anne Blot, the heiress and granddaughter of Alice Umfreville. So in other words, this whole Barry thing, this whole Barry manor was held by Oliver St. John, who had leased it for life to John Andrew of Roos, during whose tenure the manor was valued at 10 marks. In other words, £6, 13 shillings and 4 pence. In other words, Barry became a backwater. It was just not, you know, it's just like a farm, isn't it? You know, just nobody really lives there. And the reason why nobody really lives there is that the population was wiped out. It would have been, just think about it, Anne, right? You're quite happy serving teas and coffees at the front at the port in Barry in 1349, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's no coffee in the cups because it hasn't turned up yet. Nobody's invented tea bags or tea, so you've got some empty cups, right? These people come off their boats, right, and they're dropping dead as you're looking at them. Too late, Anne. The rats are scurrying around. You've been bitten by a flea. You've only got hours to live. You've now got your Restus pestis in your system, right? And you've got abortive plague, you've got septicemic plague, you've got bubonic plague, you've also got pneumonic plague. You die almost instantly. You die within about 2 or 3 days because you've got the septicemic plague, which is a 99% death rate. So in other words, Anne, it's quite likely you wouldn't have even been able to get over to Cumkiddy. So whoever's living at Cumkiddy's just saying, keep away, Anne. We've had enough of your buns. So in the 1390s, Barry was settled by trustees upon Oliver, younger son, Alexander, something known as tail mail. Alexander St. John entered into possession and was dwelling in Wales in 1398, but he does not appear to have been succeeded by male heirs in the manor subsequently. It is held by his eldest brother John in 1424. In about 1500, the manor and castle was owned by, or more probably leased to, Maurice St. John. He was part of the family and was also leased of Ogmore lordship between 1506 and 1508. The St. John's continued in possession until 1660, when Barry was sold by Oliver St. John, Earl of Bolingbroke, to Evan Sayes, the Sayes family, note that, Boverton, for £1,000 £740, which was a massive amount of money in 1660, right? But that would have obviously been it probably would have been more than 2,000 acres, I've got to say. Now, Barry Castle would have looked nothing like this in 1660. In fact, there was nothing left of it. It was just a squaddling ruin. This is actually an artist known as David Crouch, after the work of Howard J. Thomas. Note that little queer little building there, which
Looks like a dove pit.
But we've got doubts there ever existed, darling.
I don't think so. It's a weird place to have it, if you're going to have one.
See, Kate, you've just said it, right? If you're attacking the castle, having a dovecote directly in front of the gateway, do you know what I mean?
It's just for the care of it, the way it would smell, the way it would look. Do you know what I mean? No, you'd have it round the back.
Oh, you'd have it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The seat of the manor was Barry, located on high ground, Barry Castle, located on a high ground overlooking the Bristol Channel on a site which had been occupied in the Roman era. The presence of hearths and pits containing pottery from the 1100s shows that the castle had been established by that date, probably in the form of a ditch and embanked rimwork with dry stone or timber buildings and a huge statue of Lloyd George. The circular outline. You knew I was going to bring
with a traffic cone on his head.
Exactly.
The dove pit thing, though, was there evidence for some round thing there?
Yeah, maybe.
There's something in the historical records, but it's not called a dovecote. We're going to leave that there, Kate, for certain reasons, right? And actually, there's no archaeological evidence of anything there other than references earlier on. And actually, there's another story I want to tell you. And at this point, we've got to 12:30, and we'll be calling it a day. I'm gonna leave you with one last story, right? Howard Thomas, rest his soul. Basically, he said to me one day, he said, look, why don't you knock the door of the people who live opposite Barry Castle? And he said, as you look from Barry Castle over, there's a house on the corner, right? And there's a boundary wall between the people living next door. And directly underneath that boundary wall in the corner, facing the castle, right, there would be a building, right? And he asked me if I could knock the door, to see if I could dig in the garden. I did, and they basically told me to. But that's why Howard Thomas didn't do it. He got me doing his dirty work. Terrible man.
Oh, maybe the house has changed hands now, and you approach them not by knocking on their door dressed like a pirate, but you send them a respectful email or a letter with a nice letterhead on it.
Hang on, Kate, you're giving this impression that I do nothing but dress in a pirate outfit, wander around the streets and towns of Wales.
Well, I couldn't remember I couldn't think of how to describe how you normally walk around. What is that gaiter you put on your head and stuff? What's all that about? But I just wouldn't know how to describe it. You know what he looks like.
Oh, oh well, when you were younger, you were quite smart.
Yeah.
Oh, he's still smart. I don't know how. I don't know why.
He had short hair.
But on one final point, me and Anne, we went to a wine bar in Barry. I looked so smart this one day, right? So we went to this wine bar, right? And we had something to eat. And Anne got me to drink a glass of wine. It was one of these glasses of wine, right? That was half a bottle glass of wine. Right?
Oh.
It was!
Was it?
They did used to do that, didn't they?
Stan! And you are responsible for nearly turning me into
An alcoholic.
No,
No.
I started chatting up the male waiter thanks to you. I nearly turned gay. I nearly went on the date with a male waiter. And that's all your fault, Anne. Right. So what we're going to do is obviously the buildings that you're looking at now, most of them, whatever's left of it, that mainly dates from about the late 1200s, 1300s onwards, and it's likely that the building was actually destroyed a number of times, probably in a Llewellyn-Bren revolt in 1316. It would have been in a hell of a state by about 1400 with the Owen Glyndŵr movement, and by probably about the 1500s, there was nothing much left of it, other than what you see today. So what we're going to do, we're going to call that a day. There's a little bit of a plan of the castle, which we could probably look at next week. What we're going to do, I've got a phone call from somebody in Carmarthen, which I'm intrigued by. So I got to take that in a short while. So what we're going to do a bit more of this probably next week. Other than that, I might actually change my mind. I might change my mind and look at Kathy's family tree from Barry, because apparently to Genghis Khan.
I thought isn't everybody related to Genghis Khan? Something like
No,
that.
I'm related to Pete. He's my dad. Right. Right, Pete. Anything you'd like, Pete? If you've had anything to do with my mum, best of luck, because my dad didn't. Right. Okay then, Pete. Anything you'd like to say, Pete?
Oh,
he's not coming on. Pete's not saying anything. He's not. I can't even get him on.
Turn your voice up. Turn your voice up,
Pete. He's muted himself.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
For the clock. The river that you showed going around Barry Island is actually the Cadoxton River, which was then rerouted to the Bendrix.
Yes.
This is exactly what I said. Lots of writers refer to it as the Barry Brook, but it's in fact the Cadoxton River. Exactly. Yeah, exactly, Pete. That was the point. Exactly.
Yep.
Anything else, Pete?
No, that was it.
Good. Well, not good, but thanks for that, Pete. Okay. Okay, Kate, are you up to me spraying Baldrick's feathers black?
Oh, we could. I don't know. We'd have to find out what was safe.
Yeah, but the problem is I don't think he's going to be happy because he's quite proud of his plumage. Right,
I tell you how I would do it.
Yeah.
But it might be expensive to do it that way. Not paint or anything like that, or makeup, because that could really clog up his feathers. But I think this other stuff just washes off. And that you get this spray. People use it to have really thinning hair. And it's like actual little particles, rather, you know, a little bit bigger than powder. And electrostatically sticks to the hair. I expect it would stick to the feathers. And then you just, give them a shower afterwards.
Yeah. Because if we're going to do another pirate video, a TikTok video, with me, doing that earlier on.
Could you maybe do it by I don't know? Could you do it by trickery? I'm thinking.
Yeah.
The TriStar Columbia, the horse at the beginning with the wing, the Pegasus.
Yes.
The horse they used was actually black. And then they changed it technically because it just would not photograph white properly at all, apparently.
Why did you get a bloody white horse in the first place? That's freaking stupid.
They wanted to. I don't know.
Are you just doing graphics?
Pardon?
Are you just doing graphics, photos? Prints.
Baldrick likes chasing me across the field in my TikTok videos.
Videos.
Yeah.
Videos.
I tell you what, you could also do it by including dialogue with whomever, referring to him as the black turkey, without him actually being black, if you see what I mean. But if you keep calling him a black turkey,
people will believe it.
or they'll think, oh, it's the black turkey, even though he's not black.
Oh, exactly.
You see, there's ways to screw with people.
Yeah, exactly. On that note, Kate, is there anything else you want to say?
Oh, there was, I made notes of questions. And things and remarks I want to make. The 40 days.
Yeah.
And its appearance in the Bible, it was like an idiom. It just means a long time. But everybody, of course, took it literally. And you can imagine how the medievals would think that gave it authority.
So,
that God used 40 days, so we'll use 40 days. But it was really just an expression that means a long time. I think the medievals used it literally. But
so
originally it was.
They fasted for 40 days and 40 nights, and that was a long time to fast, wasn't it?
It was, but it was never. But this is a linguistics thing I read a long time ago, that it was just the expression to mean a long time.
All right.
It didn't literally mean that, but later when people wanted to recreate it, I suppose they used it literally when they didn't understand that it just meant a long time.
I think that's a really interesting point about, the medieval people most people wouldn't have a concept of even time. So, and the other thing as well is this thing about fasting, because food was in short supply, fasting was a good idea. Just don't eat. I see that. If somebody says 40 days nights fee, then people could be out for like months upon months, and nobody's going to know whether it was 40 days or not. Cool. If mathematically you don't have a brain for that, somebody could say, oh, you're
just not counting either, are you? You're going by the moon.
Exactly. Oh, so you could be out for a whole year, and that's 40 days. Fair enough. Anything else, Kate? Anything else before we go on to the two?
Oh no, you don't want to hear me go on and on about something else. Well, yes, about the changing of records. I want to decry the changing of the English language. It makes me insane. It makes me insane. Like everybody's now saying, somebody or other is not the mother of or the father of someone. They say the mother or the father to, which does not mean the same thing. And I think it's insidious and horrible. I hate it. But there are loads of examples like that. Loads.
Pete's decided to come out as being it.
Anyway, excuse that, but I mean that most sincerely.
Pete's new pronoun.
It's devaluing.
Exactly. That's what's so fabulous about English, having purloined all these words and all these expressions from everywhere. It's so expressive. It's so expressive, and it's just disgusting that they dumb it down. And the thing is, the other thing, I'll tell you a great example now is mental health. People say mental health when they mean mental health problems. And so they say, I'm suffering from mental health. And they say it on the telly. Newsreaders say it. It's nuts. It's nuts.
Yeah.
Well,
that's fine, darlings.
I have
okay. Anyway, thanks for that, Kate. What we're going to do, I could tell people.
Sorry,
to go.
I'm in a mood.
Okay. Who else? Right, have we got anything from Richard or Kathy before we go?
No, thanks.
Go on, Rich.
The only bit I was wondering really, it's not something we actually talked on there. It's looking at that map you had, and I'm thinking of where exactly is the manor house at the Calcutta?
Right. Okay. We're going to chuck your map back on. Hang on. We could chuck the map on. We're going to answer that question. Let's just get the map. We can't do this without a map, right? So we love maps.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're missing Ruth.
Yeah. I'm going to ring her after to see if she's okay.
There it is.
Right. Hang on. Okay, go.
I gotta laugh at that Dovecote. It looks like a TARDIS.
Yeah, where
being attacked by the TARDIS.
Yeah.
Where is that manor house on the Calcutta?
I've seen references to one, or the people thinking there was one.
Yeah, but that's gonna be under the main road, isn't it?
Trying to work out where it would be.
Oh, you know, under the actually, you know, under that new housing estate, it's going to be under there.
Or under the butts.
Yeah,
Or
very
so
odd.
on
Yeah, we don't no idea, Richard. Absolutely no idea.
Is
Anyway.
that oh, what's it called? This road here, the black one with the arrow.
No,
What's
that's a
this?
river.
Oh, that's a river. Well, there is a road that goes like along there, isn't it? And that's where my tump is, isn't it?
Yes,
In Gibby.
Gibby, your tump, which is still on my list.
Yeah. You said Richard. Did Richard know something about it?
I don't know. I thought maybe you guys could go up and have a look. I don't know. Anyway, we'll have a chat about that again. Anyone got anything else they want to say before we finish today?
No, I'm okay.
No.
Right. Okay. So are you done, Anne?
Yeah, thanks.
Are you done, Peter? Are you done, Kate? Are you done, Kathy?
I can't
So are we
remember
all-
now. I can't remember what I was going to say.
Oh, don't worry about it. Right. Can I just talk about money a second? Hang on a minute. I just want to clarify something. So Kate chucks her shekels. Kathy chucks her shekels in the bank. That's good. Kate is Kate, you pay monthly?
Yeah, that's easy, isn't it? Is that good for you?
Yeah, when are you due to
I'm
pay
so
next?
lazy. It's due today, isn't it, for March?
Oh, right, yeah, yours is due today. Richard has obviously got to pay
I
his
paid
dues.
you this morning
Ah,
Wait a minute.
look at that. You're richer than you thought.
into your
Richard,
bank. Into
right,
your bank.
hey, everybody,
Carl
watch.
Langford,
Oh, we got to do the raffle in a minute. We got to do the raffle.
Royal
There is
Bank
one
of
last thing.
Scotland.
Shut up, you.
I hope that's right.
Shut up. The Royal Bank of Scotland, that's the one. Look at the express. Kate, wait for this. Look at the expression on Pete's face. Right. Right. Pete's got to pay us £50, right? And the money is due for this class on a Wednesday morning as well.
This is the
Oh, can't be
£32
good.
one, isn't it?
Right. So yeah. So basically, that'll be due, I think, next week, Pete.
Right.
Yeah, because you paid the second thing of the month. So yeah. So yours is next week. But your usual 50 is due, Pete, and then just sort the other one out. And that's £24, Pete.
How much?
£50. No, 24.
What?
24. Oh, anyway, so
I gotta pick up my crochet hook sometime. Can I give
Well,
you?
I was going, yes. Oh,
hang on. fine,
Carl,
but-
give out my phone number and you come out one day and we'll have lunch and I can give you your hook and I can lecture you about what I know about the West End of Barry.
Don't
Would you
tell
like that?
anyone. Don't tell anyone I'm an actor. Right, what we're gonna do, we're gonna finally do the raffle. So Pete's number 1, Richard is number 2 and 3. Kathy is number 4. And Anne is number 5, and Ruth is number 6. And Kate is number 7. So let's do this now. Let's do this now, right?
Come on, Kathy, you're
come
so
on.
lucky.
Right,
Come on, Richard.
Right, go on then.
Richard
Go on.
looks like he's got a lot of secrets.
Yeah, go on
Oh,
then. Right, here we go. We're going to press the number, and the one who's won it this week is number 3. It's Richard.
I'm psychic, I told you. There you go. Congratulations, Richard.
I need a secret stamp.
Perfect.
Yeah, but I think it would be great for you.
Yeah.
The universe knows what it's doing.
Anyway, folks. Anyway, anything else anyone wants to say? Well done on winning that, Richard. Anything else anyone wants to say?
This is lovely to see you all. Mwah, mwah, mwah. And it's been really fun today. Thank you. Mwah, mwah.
I just sent you my email. I've just sent you my phone number.
Oh, this is being streamed.
It's down there on the.
I tell you what. What I'll do is I will stop the recording, and you two guys can swap your number.
Bye, everybody.
Right. So Richard, Peter,
Peter.
I will see you next week. Peter, and Richard, and Kathy, I will see you next week as well. If you guys haven't got anything else to say.
What time tonight?
Oh yes, 7:15.
7:15 again, isn't it right?
7:15.
Okie dokie.
Anyway, Richard, Kate will drop the prize over, whatever it is.
Yep, too late. I know where you live now.
I think it'd be great for Richard to have. Oh, be great.
Now,
for
Kathy, you want to meet us too?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
We'll arrange when it suits you because you're working. Yeah.
I don't work in the afternoons now.
Whoopee. Okay. We'll synchronize our diaries, darlings.
Okay then. All right.
Right. Okay, folks. What we're going to do. Okay, Kathy and Richard, I'm going to say goodbye now. If you haven't got anything else to say, and I'm going to try, guys, and I'm going to leave this on for a minute so you two can have a chat. Then I'll switch off.
Lovely.
So, okay,
Thank you. Have a great day.
We will take care. And I'm going to say quickly, anyone watching online, don't forget to like and subscribe. And we're saying goodbye to Kathy and Richard now. And we're going to take this offline on 3, 2, 1. Offline now. You can say whatever you like.
Whoopee.